What's up, guys? 5-Star PayPal Tech here, and welcome back to another Boiler Room session. For today, we're going to do a complete end-to-end walkthrough of how to rebuild a 2K2 or a Generation 2 Intimidator using the new rebuild kits that I have listed on my website. And the website, again, is 5starpbtech.com. This rebuild kit has end-to-end, literally every O-ring that you need, including the regulator seats, or Schrader valve seals to rebuild this thing. This is meant to rebuild A to Z a stock Generation 2 Intimidator. Yeah, this is basically going to get it all sealed up and ready to set pressures, and we're going to walk through what the optimal pressures and dwell on virtually all the settings are. So without further ado, there's 5 bags inside of the kit. Bag 1 is going to be for replacing all the O-rings on the stock bolt. Bag number 2 is going to be for replacing all the O-rings in the low pressure regulator. Bag 3 is for the high pressure regulator. Bag 4 is for the front block. And then the last bag, bag number 5, is going to be for the ram sleeve, poppet, and the ram itself. It's a complete kit. We'll get the gut marker sealed up and ready to air up and set the pressures. And in the next video section, we're going to walk through all the tools that you'll need to rebuild a Generation 2 Intimidator, so stay tuned. All right, guys, short walkthrough on all of the tools that we're going to need to rebuild this thing. First, as always, we'll need a Allen key kit to undo the screws to get this thing opened up. We're also going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. The alternative that we may end up using is going to be a flathead screwdriver, and that's really for the case where you don't have a socket driver to take out the Schrader valves from the low pressure reg and the high pressure reg. They have a little flat in there that you could use as leverage to get them out, so we may end up using a flathead attachment for the screwdriver. O-ring pick. We'll also need a set of needle nose pliers, and that's going to be for grabbing the pistons out of the regs. We're going to lubricate all the O-rings in this, minus the O-rings on the bolt, using Dow 55. If you don't have Dow 55, you can use Dow 33. Both work great. For the bolt O-rings, for those who do want to keep those lubricated, I usually run them dry, to be honest, but you can use Planet Eclipse gun oil. That would be the lubricant that I'd recommend for the bolt only. To set the regulators, we're going to be using a high pressure regulator tester for high pressure reg. These are for sale on my website. They're going to retail for around 50 bucks and come with a really nice high quality liquid filled gauge, really accurate, and it also comes with a nice little pressure reset button on the back that you could use for just dialing the pressures in. And then in some cases, this one has a Ashcroft regulator. I also will have these pressure gauges for the low pressure regulator available on my website. They're really great as tuning gauges, specifically for setting pressures the first time. And then these will come packaged with a plug that you could use in place of the gauge, so that once you set it, you plug the thing up, and now you don't have a bulky gauge on your marker. So that's going to be pretty much it. Next video, we're going to dive into bag number 1, where we'll be replacing all the O-rings on the bolt, so stay tuned. All right, so we're going to start with bag number 1, and that's going to correlate to the bolt. So to pull the bolt out, we're just going to lift the pin, and the bolt will slide right out. As always, we're going to start by giving this a nice deep cleaning. So it's going to start by just running the microfiber cloth over it and just getting rid of all the dirt. You can see here too, bolt pin is a common place for just old lube and just gross stuff to live, so just make sure you keep that nice and clean. And I'm just going to pop these O-rings off. Words to the wise, do not use, or there's no scientific backing to this, but anecdotally, I am not a big fan of these colored O-rings. The reason why is I found that they end up feeling a bit soft over time and don't really retain their, I don't know, just like their durometer, which is basically how hard they are. That's what she said. So you'll notice here that I'm running a microfiber cloth through the O-ring channels to get this thing nice and clean. It ain't glamorous, but it's honest work. So once that's nice and clean, bolt's going to be ready for new O-rings. We're just going to grab them from bag number 1. And they just go right back into their O-ring grooves. Cool. So bolts rebuilt. Next video, we'll go into bag number 2 to rebuild the low pressure regulator. So stay tuned. All right, guys, in this section, we're going to be rebuilding the low pressure regulator using bag number 2. So for most of the low pressure regulators, there's actually 3 different styles for this. The Dragon Intimidator is, actually, I guess there's really only 2. The Dragon Intimidator and the stock 2K2 regulator, which I actually have here. Here we go. Stock Dragon and stock 2K2 regulator are going to be somewhat similar in that they both have the same style disassembly where the tip just unscrews, and that's going to allow you to access all the internals. The other style is going to be, this is an example, this is the Ironman style low pressure regulator, and it just unscrews. You can see that there's a just a larger cap. The Lasoya low pressure regulator is very similar. The Species is very similar. ECX is another style that's very similar. So it's just the difference in how it disassembles. But going over to the Dragon, first thing that we're going to do is just grip it, and you're going to unscrew it from the front block. And one thing that I'm noticing on this one is there's a lot of resistance, which means that you know, this square O-ring, which is probably the original one to be honest, has taken a little bit of beating over time. So we're going to just take that off. We're also going to get in the O-ring grooves with the microfiber and just clean this thing up. And you'll notice that I clean up the threads. I literally clean up everything. All we're doing here is we're taking O-rings off, so we're going to be replacing them. But I always make sure to give everything a really thorough cleaning. And the reason why is because the old lube that gets gunked up in here over time is really just a magnet for dirt, and it can cause scratching on the internals, cause them to go out of spec. It's just a good preventative measure. Okay, so there's 2 O-rings that we want to pull out of here. Luckily, we're pretty much going to be rebuilding this thing in terms of largest O-rings to smallest O-rings. So we're going to take the largest one in here. It's just visibly the largest. It's a 0.20 70 durometer O-ring. And then the second largest, which is a 114, you'll notice it's a little bit thicker, but there's also another thick one in there. So it's the bigger of the 2. And we'll do the 114 first. That's going to go on the bottom. And then the 120 is just going to go right around the top of the base. And so the body itself is rebuilt. Next step, we're going to take off the tip here. The adjuster plate came off with it. And we're just going to clean up the threads on this. And I guess one thing that we could do while this is out, we're going to grab the Allen keys, and specifically the 316 Allen key. We're just going to unscrew the screw here so that a few threads are showing. The reason we're going to do that is really just to zero it out, so that when we do air this up eventually to set the pressures, it'll be at 0 psi. We're also going to clean the adjuster plate. If you just tip this over, in most cases, both the adjuster plate and the mainspring are just going to fall out. So we also want to give the mainspring a nice clean on the outside. If it's visibly gunky with old lube, clean all that out of there. Next, you have your piston inside of here. You could kind of see it in there. We're going to use the needle nose pliers to just grip it up and just pull it right out. And then this is going to be the same deal. We're just going to give this a nice cleaning on the outside. And we're going to throw a new O-ring on this as well from the kit. So this is going to be a 113 Buna 70 durometer O-ring. And then same deal, we're just going to clean inside of that O-ring groove. This thing's already looking brand new. Crazy. Now you too can give your markers the 5-star treatment. Okay, so again, this is going to be the third largest O-ring. It's the thicker one, but the smaller of the thicker O-rings. Once you have that on there, we're just going to set this off to the side. We'll lubricate it at the end. We're now at the point where we have this basically disassembled to the body. There's one last part in there, and that's your Schrader valve. It's a little brass, you could even see it. It's like a little brass nut inside of there with a pin sticking out of it. The easiest way to get that out of the low pressure regulator body is by using a 3/8 socket driver. And if you don't have a 3/8 socket driver, you could use a flathead screwdriver because you could kind of see it. The Schrader valve nut has a flat in it, and all you would need to do is just depress the pin and use the flathead to just leverage the whole thing out of there, and it just unscrews. So luckily this one's in good shape and is not putting up much of a fight to come out. Sometimes they do, in which case heat is your friend. So now that we have this thing disassembled to just the body, as you could probably guess, we're going to give this a nice cleaning, starting with the threads. And we're just going to feed the microfiber cloth all the way into the regulator body. And just give it a nice little twirl in there. Make this bad boy clean as new. Wow. I mean, you could even see compared to before, that really makes a difference. You could really see yourself in there. Man, proud moment. Okay. Low pressure regulator body is clean. We're going to now focus on the Schrader valve. So grab your O-ring pick, and the first thing we're going to do is just pull the O-ring off of here. Again, I hate these colored O-rings. I think they fall out of spec so easy, but I also don't have any scientific proof of that. It is hunch, but I wouldn't be surprised if I was right. And we're just going to give that a nice cleaning. We're going to replace it. The O-ring that we just pulled off is a 010 Buna 70 durometer O-ring. Just going to slide a new one on there. And then we're going to take the Schrader valve pin and just going to give that pin a little cleaning. Some of these might come with a few different types of seals. This is your Schrader valve seal, and the one that came on there. Some of them came with these Teflon O-rings. They're pretty hard. I don't really like them. I found that they're prone to overpressurizing, and they're just not the best material for these. They're actually a bit too hard. The ones that I include in the in the kit, and this is going to be the smallest O-ring that's in there. The deal with these is that they're a 90 durometer O-ring, but they're made from a chemically resistant material. So in the case of like lubricants, namely your Dow 55 from the piston, finding its way onto this O-ring, it's going to have no effect on it. It's not going to soften up the O-ring. This O-ring will probably last the life of the marker. So I'm sorry. One thing that I want to recap, there's 3 parts to the Schrader valve. We have our pin, which then is followed or chased on with that O-ring in the kit. Again, it's the smallest one. And then the Schrader valve nut is going to go on top of that. And when it's assembled, it looks like that. So once we have this all assembled, we're just going to guide it back into the low pressure regulator body. There we go. And then I like to just use my finger to turn it in hand tight. And then you could use your screwdriver or your nut driver to just take it all the way from there. So that's installed. Next up, we're going to throw some Dow 55 or Dow 33 will work as well on the O-ring here. And again, just like all my other videos, no need to go crazy on the amount of lube that you use. In fact, I usually find that less is more, because again, the lubricant really just attracts dirt, so don't like to overdo it. In terms of the reinstall here, you'll notice that there's basically two ends of this. There's a meatier end and then there's a skinnier end. So we just want to make sure that the skinnier end goes down. That's what makes contact with the Schrader valve. Next part to go in is the low pressure regulator mainspring, followed by the adjuster plate. And once that's in there, you just want to give it a nice little press in to make sure that there's some spring resistance. Screw this back in. And your low pressure regulator is rebuilt. In the next video, we're going to go over how to rebuild the high pressure regulator. What's up, guys? So in this next section, we're going to rebuild the high pressure regulator. That's going to be bag number 3. So in order to get to it, we're going to just pull the macro line out of the fitting, and we're just going to unscrew it. Owner of this is actually a bit ahead of the game. What I just noticed, and you might have noticed it too, Bob Long, bless his heart, made these regulators with, I don't know what kind of method to the madness there was with machining the threads on these, but in a lot of cases, the macro line fitting could come out sitting right here. It could come out, it basically out of the box really comes out sitting to the side to some degree. What the owner of this gun did, which I agree with and do with all my guns that use the torpedo rigs, he put a 113 O-ring at the base, and basically what allowed, and by the base I'm just talking the base of the threads here, and the benefit of that is when you screw this thing in, you could get the macro line fitting to sit in line with the trigger guard, so it's a lot comfier to hold versus it being out to the side. So that's a quick pro tip. Nice work to the owner of this one. I'm gonna set the marker off to the side. The torpedo regulator is basically 2 parts. It splits right in half and just simply unscrews. You're going to have a top half and a bottom half, so we're going to set the top half off to the side. There's 3 O-rings needed to rebuild it. The first of which is going to be the O-ring at the ASA tip. Again, we're going to get these devilish colored O-rings out of this thing. We're going to clean up the threads area. Next up, we're going to replace the macro line O-ring. And in order to do that, we're going to use the needle nose pliers. And what I like to do is just grip it lightly so that you don't scratch it. And you just kind of yank it off, and it just comes right off. So toss that off to the side, and we'll use a O-ring pick to fish the 010 70 durometer Buna O-ring out of that thing. And then it really just goes, fits right back in there. So I really just press that thing in there. You could use the O-ring pick to kind of guide it back into the place. And once it's like somewhat in there, just by hand, just press the collar back in there. That thing's rebuilt. So you'll also notice that there's another one of those brass nut Schrader valve pieces right here. And it actually rebuilds the same way as the low pressure regulator one did. So again, you could use a flathead screwdriver. I'm going to use the 3/8 nut driver to just get that guy out of there. All that out, and then just get in there with the microfiber cloth to give it a nice cleaning. Boom, squeaky clean. So gonna clean the Schrader valve piston. One thing that, this is actually a good thing to note, One of the common instances for overpressurizing, specifically with these brass Schrader valve pins, is that they can bend over time, especially if you find that the Schrader valve seal that goes on top of it, like that, if it uses another variant of the stock one, which is made out of polyurethane or urethane, it degrades over time. And in some cases I've found customer markers with these seals basically totally disintegrated. Basically what that means is it basically turns the torpedo regulator into a gas through from your tank. Obviously not good. So it's good to make sure that these seals are well maintained. That's why I use a chemical resistant seal. That way lubricants and stuff don't eat away at it over time. The other thing to take a look at is to make sure that this pin is completely straight. In some cases, when they do overpressurize from that seal degrading, I've also seen it cause issues where the pin just like bends under the pressure, and then that can also cause overpressurizing issues once you actually do replace the seal. It basically gives you the same outcome where reg turns into a gas through. Okay, next one, we're going to take the 010 O-ring off of the nut, give the nut a good cleaning. Clean nuts, gotta love it. Here's bag number 3. Okay. All right, so that goes there, and then we're going to grab the smallest O-ring in here, which is that harder chemical resistant O-ring. That's going to go on the piston, and then the nut's going to follow that, and then this whole assembly just goes right back into the top of the regulator. Screw that in by hand, and then finish it off with the driver. Cool, so that's part 1. Part 2 is going to be rebuilding the bottom half, and actually looking down this thing, you could see there's this gross globs of rubber, so I'm kind of scared to see what the piston actually looks like. To get the piston out of here, we're just going to use the needle nose pliers. And you just grip the tip lightly and just kind of yank it out of there. So I don't know what those bits are, but they are ugly. And we just want to give this piston a nice cleaning. And take that O-ring off, and we'll get in the O-ring groove. Going back to the position of the macroline fitting, once you take that beat up O-ring out of the piston, you can actually repurpose it to sit at the base of the threads there, so that your macroline falls into that optimal position. Just word to the wise. And then yeah, we're going to take that 013 O-ring and just replace that. Set that off to the side. And then last piece here, we're going to just kind of tap that. The main spring and then the adjuster plate are going to fall right out. And then same deal with the low pressure regulator. We're going to take a 316 Allen key, just adjust the regulator so that some threads are showing. That'll effectively zero this out, so that when we air it up on the gauge, it'll be at 0 psi. Give us a nice little starting point. First thing that we want to do here too is just kind of clean up the threads like before. And actually one last O-ring. I believe it's a 016 that we have on this, right at the base. That's the last O-ring in the bag. Now the regulator is completely rebuilt from an O-ring perspective. Still a little bit of cleaning and then reassembly to do. We're going to stick the microfiber cloth into the bore of this. Just give it a really deep cleaning. Beautiful. From here, clean the adjuster plate. I always just find the side where the where it looks like the adjustment screw engages it, and I'm just going to put that side down so that it continues to re-engage it. We're going to clean the mainspring, just a quick wipe down, nothing special. That's going to go in next. So it's adjuster plate first, then the spring, then we're going to throw some lube on the piston, and again, just enough to coat that O-ring so that it looks like this. So again, it's not really like caked on there, just enough to cover that O-ring. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put it in with the thick side. There's two kind of like sides here. There's a skinny side and the thick side. We're going to go thick side down, facing the adjuster plate. Just shove that back down in there. Screw the two halves together. And high pressure regs rebuilt. In the next video, we're going to start the real disassembly and teardown of the marker, starting with the frame, and then we'll use bag number 4 to replace the O-rings on the front block. So stay tuned for that video. All right, guys, so we're going to finish breaking down the marker. Basically, the game plan here is we're going to take the one side of the grips off. We're going to get the clamshell apart and disassemble the electronics, pull the entire frame off, and then clean up the eye area. That's going to get us down to basically the body and the front block, and we'll end the video by replacing the O-rings on the front block. So to get there, we're going to take the 5/64 Allen key and just grab these 2 screws out. Get that out of here. Just going to throw away these Teflon O-rings. Those are garbage. There we go. And I'll be honest, I really just like to kind of throw these behind the trigger guard. I'm being a little lazy. We're going to grab a 3/32 Allen key and take off the clamshell screws. And once we have these screws out, the clamshell will start to separate. And it's really important that we don't just like pull the left half, so driver's side or the side that's facing us, just like yank it off. We want to pull it off lightly. And the reason why is because the membrane pad that is basically connecting these 2 buttons to the board, there's a wiring harness there, which we just pulled off from that piece. So we're going to set that off to the side. Actually, before we do, just give that a nice little cleaning on the underside. This is going to be a good time to whip out your Phillips head screwdriver so that we can take out those 2 screws. We're going to start with using a 1/16 Allen key to just undo the board screw. And then the board will essentially pull out. There's 2 connectors, a top one and a bottom one, and we're actually just going to pull both off. They just pull right off. So the top one goes to your eyes, the bottom one goes to the main harness and basically the battery. So now that that's off, we're going to use the Phillips head screwdriver, and we're going to undo the LCD, or yeah, that's an LCD board. LCD board screws, and we're just going to remove everything. I'm going to put those off to the side. Okay, so we have a whole mess of stuff from here. So what I like to do is first just separate the eye covers. That way the frame is basically just like ready to take off. the one thing that you have two options for getting the frame apart from here, because you also have to remember that the solenoid is still connected to the body. And in a lot of cases, there might be a screw holding it in right there. So if you were to just yank things off, I don't know, you just have opportunity to kind of disturb things. So what I like to do is I'll get this started by just kind of loosening the frame screws. And just get those out of there. Now, this is a not a stock screw. It's not very shallow, or it's not very deep. Lucky that I have second Allen key kit off to the side. That's a little bit more worn, so we're going to try to use that to, there we go. Okay, so we want to keep it kind of like this and just gently separate the body from the frame. And then next step, we might want to use needle nose pliers for this. Just grab the hose right at the base and pull very gently. There we go. We're going to do that for all of them. There we go. Got my camera. Cool. So, I mean, this is all set. The one thing that we might want to do real quick is just kind of clean the top, where there's paint, dirt accumulation around the trigger. Just want to make sure that the switch clicks. We're going to set the frame off to the side. The next step here, so we're going to get the eyes out of the body and also check the condition of the ball detents. So we're going to go back to the 5/64 Allen key and take the eye covers off, and also just a good opportunity to clean the detent area. It's actually really important. After every time you play, I would recommend doing this and just cleaning the detent area, because if there's old paint, it can actually make the detent really soft, and it'll cause double feeds if you're using a force feed loader like a Halo or a rotor. They're a little bit more forgiving with like a Spire. Just clean up around the eye cover area. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. That's the wrong Allen key. There it is. Also, to plug the site a little bit, 5starpbtech.com. I do sell my own private label brand of ball detents. They're blue. They're a little bit longer and stiffer, that's what she said, than stock. The reason why I really like these and had them made was that with today's smaller paint, sometimes the ball detents don't stick far enough into the breech. The force detents definitely do not work. Those got listed on Blast Legacy and were missold and caused headaches for a bunch of people. I like them better than MacTev because they're also a little bit longer. And as long as you keep them clean, they're made out of a really just solid material. So as long as you keep them clean, they'll last the life of the marker. And they will be selling for about $8 a set. So we're just going to give that a nice clean. I'm also going to give the inside of the front block a nice clean. Cool. And then to get that front block off, it's a 1/8 Allen key that is held in by that screw, so we're just going to take that out. Usually once you get it out a little bit, you could just kind of tilt the front block to the side and get it all out. So more opportunity to just clean the dang thing. And then we're just gonna yank these O-rings off. These are 015 Buna 70 durometer O-rings. For those with anodized guns that have issue getting those O-rings to seal up, you have two options for alternatives. You can either switch it to the same size, the 015, but a harder O-ring, which is the 90 durometer. That's one option, and sometimes that just has a snugger fit and we'll get it sealed up. In other cases, and actually I tried this on another marker per the advice of another tech friend. You can also use a 14x2 millimeter O-ring, which is the same as the bolt sail for most Planet Eclipse guns like the CS3 or the Geo, and they come in those kits. But for the sake of a stock one, we're just going to use 015s. And now that this is rebuilt, we're going to further disassemble the body in the next video and replace everything ram sleeve related. So more in the next video. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, so we're down to basically the top half of the marker for complete disassembly. What we're going to do here first in the plan of attack is first to pull out the poppet. So the spring, usually you could just pull right out, and then I use the needle nose pliers to pull out the actual poppet itself. Looks like this owner has a Generation 3 ram sleeve in here, which is pretty nice. Usually you could tell it by the poppet, but I've come across some wild guns, and you guys even saw in the Generation 3 rebuild video, the guy had a Generation 3 ram sleeve, but with a Generation 2 poppet inside, which wasn't correct for the marker, but it all rebuilds the same, so it kind of worked out for the sake of the video, but owner then replaced the poppet. So anyways, from here we're going to take the poppet out and just give it a nice cleaning. In bag number 5, this is basically the start of it, so we're going to use the smallest O-ring in that bag to rebuild the poppet. It's a 004 O-ring, 70 durometer Buna O-ring, and this O-ring comes off really easily with the O-ring pick. It's one that I usually just like to send flying across the tech bench, and then just get the microfiber cloth in that O-ring groove. The 004 O-ring's actually, if you've never done it before, it's a little bit of a pain to get on there. And I'm going to give you my advice for getting it on there, which is, there we go, let's get it out of the bag. I usually just like to take the poppet and set it down against something with the plastic side down, and with your two thumbs, just kind of get it on the tip and stretch it out, and then push down. And now that's rebuilt. So we're just going to set the poppet and the spring off to the side. Next up, we're going to use, and this is a pretty crucial time to have access to a socket driver. If you do have access to one, the size is a 3/16, and that'll basically just grip these things right away and make it super easy. If you don't have one of these, I would recommend just grabbing the flats with needle nose pliers from the top like that, and just kind of twisting them until they come off. Just want to make sure that you don't grip the actual barb itself too hard and flatten them out. So the 3/16 socket driver is really the easiest way to get these guys out. Cool. So now that those are off, we're now ready to start taking the ram sleeve out. So to do that, there's one set screw that's holding it in. It's right here, and you're gonna take it out using a 5 30 seconds Allen key. And what's cool about this one, you could kind of hear that like squeak sound. There we go. That's actually the telltale sign that this screw, and therefore the ram sleeve, has actually never been taken out of this marker. And that squeaking sound is actually the Loctite holding the screw in, just kind of cracking around the threads and breaking the seal for the first time. So we're taking this thing's virginity. I'm gonna set that off to the side. Cool. Another pro tip here. It turns out that the 316 Allen key, or nut driver or socket driver is actually the perfect size to get on the inside of the hole in the front of the ram sleeve. So I usually just kind of use that to get the ram sleeve out. And you just pull it out and recollect your socket thing, give that back. And then, yeah, like everything else, just give it a nice thorough cleaning. So the Generation 3 ram sleeves started the use of U-cups. If you have one and it still works, it's actually easier to get these into the marker. So I might actually leave this one on. However, the kit does come with two 112 70 durometer Buna O-rings, which do the exact same thing. Actually, for the sake of this video, there's no performance difference between the two. Actually, before I put that on, let's just make sure we clean up the threads, or the O-ring grooves, really nicely. So just make sure it's nice and clean. I'm going to stick the 012 O-rings on there. And then from here, we're going to unscrew the ram cap. I'm going to give the threads a nice cleaning. And then for most ram caps, they have a 011 O-ring on there. Which is also in the kit. Just roll a new one on there. We're gonna just give that a little tap backwards, and the ram's gonna come right out. This one's a little bit dirty, and this is also another example of just kind of like why I don't like putting a lot of lube on these things. So when we re-lube it, you guys might be surprised in how little I use. But again, we just want to get this thing nice and clean. Even on the part where the bolt pin goes. And we're just going to take these O-rings off. It's probably easiest to use the O-ring pick on the smaller one. Get inside the O-ring groove. And then take off the rear O-ring, and same deal, we're just going to clean inside of that O-ring groove. There's all kinds of gunk in this thing. Need a cleaning bad. Cool. So there are two O-rings left at this point in the kit. There's going to be a 011 O-ring, which is the rear one. It's a 011 70 durometer Buna O-ring. And then the front O-ring that we replaced is a 006 70 durometer Buna O-ring. So once that's rebuilt, we're going to set that off to the side. And from here, it's going to be a big cleaning job. So what I'd advise is you grab your microfiber cloth. We're just going to stick it in through the back. Just kind of twist it in there. And the intent here is to give this ram sleeve a nice deep cleaning. This ram sleeve has never been taken out of the marker, so it's kind of hard to see on a black one. And it's also equally hard to see what comes off of the ram sleeve using a black microfiber cloth. But if it wasn't black, I think we'd be pretty grossed out at what we saw come off of the microfiber cloth. So what you just saw me do is basically I grabbed the microfiber cloth with the O-ring pick and just kind of dragged it forward and forced it forward so that I could really get in there. And that's going to clean out the main bore. And then from there, I'm just gonna grab some Q-tips. And what I'm really going to make sure that I do a nice job of is, you could see there's usually like a silver ring. I'm not sure if this is going to capture it, right around the hole where the ram sleeve enters to hit the poppet. And I'm just going to twist a what's it called, a Q-tip around in there, because that's typically where the most dirt accumulates. All right, and then part 2 of this, we're going to grab 2 Q-tips, and we're basically going to shove them both down the front of the ram sleeve and give the area where the poppet lives a nice deep cleaning too. There we go. Just kind of shimmy it in there. Could even twist them around in there so that, make sure you pick up all the dirt. Pull them all out. Nice and gunky. Nice and disgusting. Just give it a final pass. Cool. Pretty much no dirt came off of it that time. This is the cleanest this ram sleeve's been in a very long time. This thing's gonna shoot like new. Cool. Set the ram sleeve aside. We're going to do 2 last things. We're going to basically clean the top and the bottom bore of the marker, and then we're going to transition to the next video where we reassemble the dang thing. So just kind of guide the microfiber through the entire lower tube. Thing will be squeaky clean. One other thing you might want to do after you guide the microfiber through the top tube, just run a Q-tip through the eye hole and the detent holes. Make sure that whole area is also very clean. Let's see if we could pull this out through the front. Need to go a little bit more. This is the boring part of the video. Or maybe the whole thing's boring. I've had my Generation 3 video up for about a week now, and the analytics on YouTube tell me that it hasn't been watched longer for 7 minutes, which means y'all are only watching short spurts of it to cover really specific parts. Wow, that looks good. Here, let's see, can get the mirror shine inside. Not really. Oh well, this thing's freaking clean. I'll just use a Q-tip to push the gunk out of the eye holes. And same deal with the detent holes. Yeesh, this thing really needed this. Okay. Cool. This thing's ready for reassembly. More in the next video. All right, guys, so we're going to start to reassemble this thing. First thing that we want to do is just take a look down the bottom tube and check for any kind of like bumps on the bottom side, particularly where it would line up with this screw hole for the front frame screw. And that will basically indicate if the body is like on the verge of being punctured. And if so, you may want to consider getting the ram sleeve in through the back of the gun. But if you have no signs of wear in that part of the marker, we're going to use the front. A recommendation here, I usually like to put it in as if it was about to just be fully installed with the set screw hole facing upwards. Once it's there, you're going to want to turn it 90 degrees so that it's actually facing to the side. And what that's going to do is just eliminate failure points on the way in with this thing potentially snagging. And you're just going to push it in. This one was, some bodies are just a tighter fit. And you want to be really careful as you're pushing the, what's it called? The ram sleeve inwards, because it's really easy to cut the 2 O-rings that we put on there. A neat little trick that I like to do, as you're pushing it in, I like to use that 3/16 socket in that hole, and you can actually use that as leverage to turn the ram sleeve as you're pushing it in. And we're going to do that also just to like realign the hole for the set screw. And that set screw is just going to go right back into the body, same way it came out. Cool. Ram sleeve is back in. Next, we're going to throw the barbs back in. So I just like to get them started in terms of being threaded by hand. And then once the party's started, take it all the way with the nut driver. And again, you don't want to go too hard on this. Just get them hand tight in there until you feel that they've kind of bottomed out. What I've seen a lot of people do is they screw it in too far, and then you actually end up snapping the barb out there, and it basically just leaves the threads inside the ram sleeve, which is really annoying to fish out. You could do it with a really small flathead, which is what I usually use. Cool. Okay, barbs are in. We're now going to lubricate the ram. Again, a little bit goes a really long way here, so just a little bit of lube, just enough to cover the O-ring. And then same deal with the front one. That's going to go in the ram sleeve. Ram cap will follow. This is pretty cool. This thing has like all the original parts, minus the ram sleeve, I guess. And then we're going to take the poppet, and same deal with that poppet O-ring, just enough lubricant to cover the O-ring. Wipe my fingers off. I think that's the last thing we need to lubricate. I don't put lubricant on the 2 O-rings on this. In fact, while we have it here, I'm just going to screw the low pressure rag back on. Gonna put that on. And then we're going to use the same screw that locked it down back in. Cool. That's screwed in. And then from here we're going to put the eyes back in. So same way they came out. You'll notice that the right one kind of makes a J, just so that it's easier not to get them mixed up. And put the eye cover back on there. Same on the other side. This one's going to make a nice little L with the wiring. After the video, I'm probably going to recommend to the owner that we replace his detents. Cool. So we now have the majority of the upper body open. We can even throw the bolt in at this point. This bolt actually has a pretty snug fit. This is one of the fewer. I'm actually going to recommend putting a little bit of oil on the bolt O-rings. There were some old myths that you could probably dig up on PB Nation where oil actually swells Delrin. You do not have to worry about that with these bolts and the Planet Eclipse gun oil. Cool. That's much better. The reason why it's important, if you do feel a lot of resistance, to put some oil on those O-rings is if you have too much friction going on here, it actually makes your ram move a lot slower, as if the low pressure regulator was running at a lower pressure, which is kind of counterintuitive. So yeah, just want to be conscious of that. We're now going to take the frame, and this is a good time to just reattach your hoses. So if you took the solenoid completely out, the main thing to note here is obviously the front barb from the solenoid is going to attach to the front block barb. There's two hoses. There's basically a top one and a bottom one. The top one's going to go to the middle barb on the body, and then the bottom barb on the solenoid is going to go to the rear barb on the ram sleeve. And then from here, nice and easy peasy, we're going to just kind of align the body to the frame. I'm just going to hold it together by hand. Get the screw in there first. Just to kind of hold it in. And then do the same with the rear frame screw. I have to steal that other Allen key. There we go. Cool. Looking good. Also, just a good thing to be conscious of, the front frame screw. It's actually possible to overscrew it. So just make sure that that you don't. Just hand tight is good enough. And then we're going to reconnect the eye wires. Male to female, pretty hard to screw that up. Cool. And depending on how your hose is cut, actually I might recommend, let's redo this front frame screw. And the reason why we want to do that is so that I could get the hose behind it. And it just keeps things a little bit neater in here. Cool. Next up, we're going to grab the board assembly. Just going to make sure that that's out of the way. We're going to screw in the LCD screws. What did I do? I need something to better organize my tools while I'm on the bench. Once the LCD board's back in, we're going to plug in the main harness, followed by the eye harness. There's really no correct order. You might even find that it's easier to do the eye harness first. Cool. I'm just going to get that all back aligned. Where did the board screw go? Interesting. Oh, we're going to have to replace that. So we're just going to screw that board screw back in. this thing's ready to rock. I'm just going to give it a quick turn on. Cool. That's all set. All right, so we're pretty much done with the reassembly. The last few things that we're going to do, I guess let's just get the frame back together. Once the frame's back together, and remember to just connect the LCD membrane pad. But once we get this all hooked back up together, the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the high pressure regs and then the low pressure regs. And we're going to do that in the same video. We'll go over all the pressures that you want to have everything set to. So one thing that I just like to do, once the frame is fully assembled and both the halves are together, I'm just going to unscrew the frame screws a little bit and then rescrew them just to make sure that the frame is sitting nice and straight on the body. Alrighty, so next video, we're going to set both the regulators. We're going to set the electronics, and this thing's going to be ready to rock. So more in the next video. All right, guys, so now that the marker's fully assembled, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to reset both the regs and then also reset the electronics. So for the high pressure regulator, we're going to start there. Again, you just want to make sure that the regulator is bottomed out by making sure that a few threads are just showing right there from the adjuster screw. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to hook the marker up to air, assuming that you have a on-off. If not, you're actually going to do this in reverse, meaning that you're going to hook the high pressure regulator up to the gauge and then screw your tank in if you do not have an on-off setup. So just get that screwed in. Attach the regulator. I'm going to turn the air on. And then real easy, use a 3/16 Allen key. And we're going to set this marker in particular. So quick overview on pressures. For a normal Generation 2 that has a Generation 2 ram sleeve, we're going to set the high pressure regulator to 240 PSI as a starting point. Since this one has a Generation 3 ram sleeve in it, it actually operates at a lower pressure. So we're going to start this one off at about 210 PSI, usually 205 to 210 is what I recommend as the starting point there. That'll get you in the 290s, or it should. So we're going to set that to 210, and then using my handy dandy on off bleed button, we're just going to make sure that it's actually set to 210 PSI, which it is. Pretty nifty. You could let it reset using this button. So HPR is set. We're going to bleed that. Get this gauge off of there. And we're going to screw this back on. We're actually going to turn the gun around because the other side of the marker has a nice big Ashcroft gauge. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that we were going to use this handy dandy tuning gauge. Ashcroft gauges are really big and they're accurate. So we'll just use that to set the low pressure regulator. Low pressure regulator is really easy. First thing that we're going to do is just make sure that some threads are showing. That ensures that it's set to 0 PSI. We're going to gas that up. It might leak at first, but if we did this right, as we screw it in, that just seals up. And we're going to set the low pressure regulator to 80 PSI. And it actually does even better. This is a good opportunity to throw the silencer on. So the eyes work. Just gonna set the marker to dry fire mode. So we're going to take a few clearing shots just to make sure the pressure is set correctly. Gauge is dialed right in at 80 psi. This thing's sounding good. Thing's completely rebuilt. Just some quick settings. What I usually do is I do a complete board reset. And that really just squares away all of the eye settings, depending on which board code you have. My recommendation on the dwell is running it at 9 milliseconds. So just going to reset that. There we go. And then for the eye mode, I prefer running it on force. This guy's back in the game. So if you followed this to the T, you'll have a fully rebuilt and now tuned Generation 2 Intimidator, and you can rip faces with it. Enjoy, guys. Thanks for watching.